This is the Full Spectrum Parent Podcast, the only faith-based autism podcast on the web. Here are your hosts, Greg and Jessica Hurlbut.
Well, welcome to episode 5 of the Full Spectrum Parent Podcast. We are your hosts, Greg Hurlbut
and Jessica Hurlbut, and each week we want to offer you guys a dose of help, a dose of humor, and a dose of hope. So this week we really want to highlight, we've done this once before, but we want to continue to highlight real life heroes.
Yeah.
And all that really means is people in the trenches, parents in the trenches that are doing amazing things, whether it's through special needs parents or adoption. And so who we want to highlight today is actually they're local. They live kind of in the same area that we live in, but Ashley and Logan Goucher, I hope I'm not butchering your last name, but people butcher Hurlbut, so hopefully you'll be gracious with me.
Yeah.
But they're phenomenal. So in 2014, Ashley and Logan looked to start fostering with the hopes to adopt. They had struggled for years with infertility, and they were kind of like wanting to have a big family, and all kinds of kids. Basically, Ashley, from talking to her a little bit, she just said yes. Like they had their first child. Foster child had CP, and they had a failure to thrive child, just kind of probably the kids that other people said no, Ashley and Logan said yes to. And during this time, she actually found out she was pregnant herself, but they continued to foster, which I've been there, done that. And they got a call. She was at work. Ashley was at work one day, and she got a call, and they social services said, would you take a 2-day-old baby? And she was like, yes. And they said, shouldn't you ask your husband? And she's like, oh, it's fine. And they're like, well, we have to warn you though. You need to think about this. You need to call your husband, and get it back to us. And she's like, why? And they said, well, this baby has Down syndrome. And she was like, I still say yes. And they said, well, shouldn't you think about it? And she's like, no, yes. And her husband was 100% on board. So they took in a newborn baby with Down syndrome, had other siblings that were in foster care or maybe had already been adopted, but they weren't willing to take on a special needs child. But Ashley and Logan were, and now they had the privilege of adopting. His name is Alex, and they have a daughter that's 4. Alex is 3, and then she was able to actually get pregnant again and has an 8-month-old baby boy. So you guys are heroes.
Yes.
I'm so proud to not just know you, but even that you're from this area and you represent everything that's in my heart, to love unconditionally and without restraint. So thank you guys so much.
I love when people just choose hard things, even,
yes.
Especially when something like that takes place and you don't always have this guarantee of some sort of payback, right? Like a lot of times we'll do hard things
right.
because we know the results are going to pay us back. But I think when you welcome a child into your home, especially one who has special needs, there's no payback in a sense for you, but there's just this incredible reward of doing what I think all of us as humans are called to do, which is to love people unconditionally. So that's awesome. Thank you guys for doing that.
Yeah, so this week we really want to focus on, especially with the holidays and things, mental health and parenting, right? So some people make the joke that, I had kids and I lost my mind. And there's a truth to that, right? But there is a real, your mental health is always a concern, and it always needs to be something that you put priority in. Your emotional health, your spiritual health, your physical health. But I think as a parent, a lot of times, and God's created us this way, but we default to the kids are first, right?
Yeah.
We're always caring about their needs. What do they need? Who's hungry and who needs to sleep and who needs to go to basketball practice? That our own mental health can really suffer, especially in the area of special needs.
Yeah.
Too. So just a few kind of statistics. You throw in COVID and a pandemic to the mix, and mental health has
skyrocketed.
Yes. Basically, in June of 2020, the CDC started calling people randomly and had this survey, and 40% of those people that they contacted said they were either struggling with depression or anxiety or suicide. 40%. So basically 1 out of 2 almost people that they called said, yes, that's me, which is a huge increase from before the pandemic. And they said 10% of those people had considered in the last 30 days to commit suicide, like considered, like seriously considered, not so. What we've gone through in this pandemic, and as it continues, like COVID's not going away, unfortunately, has obviously affected our mental health. But then you throw kids into the equation, or special needs kids, and it's like a whole new level, right? So it's really something important. And one thing I just want to highlight, we're going to talk about just for this dose of help, is 3 practical things that we've done kind of that is geared towards our own mental health. But I just want to touch base real quick with the fact that, we talk about anxiety and depression or suicidal thoughts, but another aspect of mental health that I didn't even fully understand until I experienced it myself was actually PTSD. To me, I thought only people that have been in the military or had a super traumatic, like near-death experience, like that's what PTSD is. So I never even read about it or learned about it because it didn't affect my world. But little did I know that I had been suffering from PTSD, especially when my kids were younger, for years, and that it was a real thing. And I'll share a little bit about my story later, but basically it got to the point where I was having panic attacks, and I didn't know. I just thought, do I have a breathing problem? Like, what's going on? And the doctor said, your adrenal glands are shot. And I'm like, well, why? I'm like, all I do is stay in my house all day. I'm not like, running from terrorists or something. And they said, because you're in this constant fight or flight mode. And I realized, I am. I'm always on guard. I'm always waiting for the next terrible thing to happen. When somebody's overflowing the toilet over here, the other person, the other child is writing all over the walls, and then a dish breaks, and then my kid gets outside, and I'm chasing after them, so it's this constant feeling that my adrenal glands literally, physically had said no more. And so I just want you guys to consider, even in parenting, especially in special needs and in autism, autistic parents are 3 times more likely to suffer PTSD than just a typical parent. So really want you guys to kind of keep that in your forefront as we talk about these practical ways.
Even before we move on, I want to just say that sometimes I think as parents, especially the more capable you are as a person in general ways, you tend to wait till you're just about dead before you'll admit there might be something wrong. This is Jessica, just so you know.
Yes.
It took us getting to this place where a couple of occasions had happened where we thought there's something going on here. And for us, we didn't even want to consider the idea that we weren't able to handle all this. And that's one of the struggles, especially having kids with autism, kids with special needs, or even just a lot of kids, or something that's beyond your capability. When you live, in a sense, in this kind of stretched place, or this place that's maybe overwhelming for too long, it does something to you, not just mentally, but also ends up being physically. Your mental state can affect your physical body and can do all sorts of things. I know for a fact, I tend to not feel like I get stressed in my head. I feel like I can handle a lot of stuff. I do handle a lot of stuff with my job.
That's called denial,
churches and all these things, but mentally I don't feel like my mind's freaking out. But all of a sudden I'll notice physically, you can just tell if I get really upset, because mostly my face will turn red. I'll get marks on my face. I don't even know why. I'll get itchy.
He has a spot on his cheek.
My body actually responds before I even mentally can allow myself to go, oh, wait, maybe I'm doing too much, or maybe something's beyond my ability right now, or maybe I need to care about my mental health. And so for us, even the idea of thinking about our own mental health was a new idea years ago, in the midst of having kids with autism and our other 3 kids, of realizing, okay, well, maybe we just aren't built to handle everything life throws at us.
Right.
And so you have to be purposeful.
Yeah, so I just want to kind of lay out 3 practical things that we did as far as our mental health. And the first one we talked a lot about, even in the marriage / parenting episode that we did last time, is the idea of asking for help. For me personally, I always feel like a burden. And I look back on my life when my kids, I had 3 kids under the age of 1, plus a daughter with autism. I should have had someone in my house with me 24/7, like a nanny. Like you see those rich people that like have nannies and stuff for like their one child that like sits in the playpen all day so that they can, I don't know, go to the spa, and you're like, oh, I'm never going to be like that. I can do it all. But like it's almost this illusion, especially when you have a bigger family or you have special needs, that, you know, kind of like Greg was saying, that I have to be able to do it all myself.
Right.
So that would be the first one. The second one for me is something that personally I had a lot of judgments about, and that is counseling. And it's, you know, kind of embarrassing to admit that I don't know, you know, I guess I would almost say look down. In the past, I'd look down on somebody if they were getting counseling, unless it was marriage counseling, and then I thought, oh, they're working on their marriage. But I felt like if someone just was getting counseling, I saw them as less than, which is ridiculous, because I got to the point in my own life where I'm like, I'm going to have to go to the psych center if I don't get some counseling. And so it was a real humbling season of my life. And I highly recommend is, if you're in a place of strain or stress or tension in your relationships, professional counseling, not like counseling with a friend over coffee, although that's nice. It's not consistent, and they're not professionals.
Commiserating isn't counseling.
No, and they might give you terrible advice. I have friends that have given me terrible advice. I love them. I'll still go to coffee with them, but it's not counseling. Okay? But what it did for me, honestly, my counselor, I wanted to find a Christian counselor. I wasn't able to. She was a very nice lady. I don't remember anything she said. So I'm not telling you need counseling because they're going to give you this great, amazing wisdom. Maybe they will. But what it did for me personally was I had an hour every week where I got to get out of the house, especially as moms. I got to step away from the stress. And I also allowed myself to vent, to grieve, or just to even feel the loss. Because I was like, dealing with my daughter's diagnosis with autism, there was a great loss there that it was like, I didn't have time to grieve it. I didn't have time to think about it. And I was just running around with my head cut off. And those feelings and emotions, they don't go away. You're just shoving them. And so I went for a year. And I mean, my husband came a couple times. I mean, he would come every time if I wanted him to, but it really wasn't about us here. It was personally, I just need this time to talk. I need someone to listen to me, even if I get zero answers, to be able to process what I'm going through. And that's really what it was for me. And it was super, super beneficial. So I highly recommend that. The last one, and I don't know if my husband wants to share in this too, is recognizing the soundtrack that plays in your head. And all I mean by that is like your self-talk. For me, when things were really hard and my kids were young and my daughter was having a lot of challenging behaviors, what repeated in my head was this: it never stops, it never ends. And that might sound a little silly when I say it out loud, but that was the real thing. Like, it was one thing to the next. Somebody was always crying. Somebody always needed something. It was never going to stop. The chaos, like, it felt like a whirlwind that was around me. And so sometimes I'd say that out loud, but even when I wasn't saying it out loud, I was thinking it, and I was angry. I was angry at my kids. I was angry at God because I just wanted to say, just give me a break, God. This is ridiculous. No one should be able to juggle all of these balls at once. And it took me years probably to even recognize this is what I'm saying to myself, and this is a lie, and I have to break that, over myself and start speaking like God's truth.
Yeah, confession is extremely powerful to ourselves and to the world around us. Just obviously looking at the world and even how we believe God created it. We see, at least in Genesis, whether that's literally how it happened or not, it doesn't really matter to me. But I do believe God spoke things. And so there's this reality that our words are extremely creative, they're not just words, they're not just ideas. So when even we say it never stops, it never ends, it's almost like we're creating the opportunity for it to never stop and never end. So we end up creating our greatest fears and creating these situations even by our own words, and we both did that in so many ways. different record. I always talk about this way, broken record thoughts, that sometimes you just got to take that record. Now, I know for some of you that might be listening, a record player is not something we've used in 40 years, and neither did I, honestly, but I always see it from the movies, right? You take that record off the thing and you smash it on the corner of the table and you say, I'm not going to play that song anymore. And so there's a place where the tip really is change your self-talk. Figure out what you're saying to yourself that puts you into this place of depression or this place of anxiety, and literally make choices to exchange those broken record thoughts for something that's hopeful, for something that's helpful. And at the end of the day, we're going to talk a little bit kind of at the end of this podcast and the dose of hope. That stuff's got to come from Jesus. It's got to come from what we know God says about us or about our situation or about our kids. And so really, we would just really challenge you to try to change what you're thinking about yourself, change what you're saying about your situation, even when it doesn't always feel like reality.
And I just add with that, this is not just positive thinking.
No.
So I was a student teacher, and that was a big thing. Let's teach all of the kids to have positive thoughts, which is great. Obviously, they can't bring religion into school. But Greg was sharing, we're coming into agreement with something with our words too, right? So am I either coming into agreement with the things that God says about my future or God says about my kids, or am I coming into agreement with the enemy, it never stops, it never ends, or life is always going to be horrible? That was another one for me, that's never going to get better. This isn't a season, this is forever. My kids are going to live with me for the rest of my life, so, my special needs kids, this is forever. And so, again, it's I'm giving the enemy power and authority in my life because of what I'm speaking and what I'm dwelling on,
Right.
So kind of as far as the dose of humor, it's a funny story that ends really sad.
It's funny at first and not funny disclaimer. At the end.
But
we laugh at it now.
We can laugh now, yes, but it was very traumatizing then. So I think it was 2015 maybe. My daughter was probably 6 years old. So my daughter with autism, Mara, she was attending an ABA program. So every day the bus would come to our house and she would get on it. Now, she hated the bus to the point that she's broken, how many windows? 2 or 1 or a door? Three bus windows and a door. Now, this was before all those broken windows because they kicked her off the bus after that. But so my daughter, she just hated the bus. She hated the noise, the unpredictableness, all of the other kids. So it was always a struggle. Is she going to make it on the bus ride today? So I had my daughter who was about 6 years old. The bus pulls up. My husband was out of town on a trip for work. So I was kind of doing the single mom thing, which is stressful in and of itself. So I go to bring her onto the bus, and, she gets onto the bus and I walk away. Well, the bus monitor comes right back out and says, oh, we need your help. She won't sit in her seat. And there's certain legalities where, the monitor and the driver obviously can't force her to sit in her seat, or if she flops on the ground, they can't pick her up, just kind of liability stuff. So they said, can you get on the bus and help us, coax Mara back into her seat so that we can buckle the seatbelt? Sure, of course I can, because I can do everything, right? So I get on the bus, and she's screaming and she's fighting me, and I'm having to push her hips into the seat, and she's flailing her body forward, and I'm just a couple minutes go by and I cannot get her in this seat. And I'm thinking, she's not even going to go to school. She's going to have this giant meltdown. Well, as I'm fighting with her for a minute, the bus driver, who has to stay at the wheel of the bus, is like, oh, excuse me. I think your other children have gotten out of the house. So this was winter time. There's snow all on the ground. And at the time I probably had, they were toddlers. I had 3 babies, basically 3 toddlers. And I look over, and my oldest had opened the door. And so now the door is swung wide open. And he's out, and he's out, in the road. And then my 2 younger, who are 1 or 2, they both are waddling onto the porch. The dog is now run out the front door too. He's circling around the bus, barking hysterically. And my dog's kind of like a demon dog. So no one wants to touch that thing. But the worst part of this whole crazy scenario is the monitor can't help me because she can't leave the bus. She can't put Mara in her seat. The bus driver can't help me because he can't leave the bus. But there's cars driving down the road, and my other toddlers are in the road. And it was the best way to describe that moment was like, it was like a visual representation of how I felt like my life. Like, this is impossible. I need 10 people to help me, but there's no one. And it's all happening at once, and someone's going to die. Like that's what I felt all the time, but it was just this picture, and I was in that moment I'm like, I don't even know what to do. So and I'm mad. I grab my daughter's arm off the bus and I'm like, well, she's not going to school today. I yell at the bus driver who's doing nothing wrong, but I just rip her off the bus. I started chasing the kids one by one and putting them back in the house. I think I just left the dog. I was like, I hope he gets hit by a car. And when I got back inside the house, I locked the doors. If you've heard any of our other episodes, we have to lock from the inside. So I locked the doors from the inside, and Mara's still having a meltdown and screaming. And all of a sudden, and I had never had this happen before, I couldn't breathe. Now, I don't mean like crying so hard. Like sometimes I cry really hard and I'm like, but it was different. It was all of a sudden something physically was happening to me. I got dizzy. I couldn't catch my breath. It was like an adrenal overload. I just couldn't think. My thoughts made no sense. I couldn't function. I couldn't stand up. And then I got scared. Like, am I having a heart attack? Like, what is happening? Do I need to call an ambulance? So I called my husband, who was away. And I don't know, I probably sounded like I was a crazy person at that moment. So I was experiencing a panic attack, but I didn't even have words to know what it was. Yeah, I don't know if you want to share on your end how you.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I can't even remember where I was, but I do remember the phone call. And I was a long ways away. It wasn't like I'm an hour away or something. I was gone for the week, probably. I mean, I might have even been overseas. And I just was like, babe, there's some. We were trying to figure it out because at the same time, like we said at the beginning of the episode, we were not overly considering the fact that we needed to care about our own mental health. We were in survival mode. We were always just like surviving, still trying to do what God wanted us to do, working at the church, doing ministry, believing God had good things, but at the same time dealing with an overwhelming life. And that was kind of the first occasion where actually I think I remember my thought being, I can never leave again. And
I think you said that on the phone.
It was multiple. This maybe wasn't the first time. It always felt like when I was gone, the world would fall apart. Like, and then just the reality was one person couldn't do it on their own, and so same thing. If she happened to be gone and I was home alone, I'd probably be making the same phone call because the same situation would occur to me. So it was just like I thought to myself, I can never leave again. I'll never be able to. I did travel a lot. I still travel, I guess, a decent amount, for ministry and for things and different missions work that we do. Right. And I just thought to myself, I'll never be able to leave again because we can't do this. And so, it ended up with it was kind of, funny looking back. The scenario looked ridiculous, but it was kind of the first moment where she realized and we both realized we have to take this seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I just kept saying something has to change. But then I was like, are we going to sell one of our kids on the black market? I don't know what can change.
That's a joke for the internet.
Yeah, sorry. But really, though, I just felt this desperation of something has to change. And I kept saying to him, I am not okay. And he'd be like, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, I don't know what it means either, but I'm not okay. And it was this overwhelming sense of like, I can't control my world, but now I couldn't control like my internal world. Like, if that makes sense. Like, and it was a scary, scary place. And that was when I started counseling and saw a doctor and really started taking this idea of mental health serious, like, and stopped looking down on others that were struggling in some way, realizing that I just hadn't had a hard enough life to be in the shoes that they were. So, yeah.
So, just kind of, we're going to kind of wind up our podcast today. But just to leave you with some hope, really we believe that despite what happens in your life, God gives you the ability to walk through it. So listen, I preached a message here years and years ago, and it's kind of become a thing I've heard around Christianity now. But this whole mantra where it says God will never give you more than you can handle is a bunch of BS.
Lie.
It's lies, and I did say BS, and this is a Christian podcast because it is. It's lies. It's a twist of Scripture. that was talking about specifically sexual sin and the idea that God will never give you more temptation than you can handle. It had nothing to do with life. The fact of the matter is this: life is more than you can handle. It's actually a fact of the matter. Your life will give you something beyond your capability, and it's right for us as humans and Christians to say, this is beyond my capability. But this is where Christians have hope. This is maybe where I look at the world and I see people go through unbelievable, difficult circumstances, or kids with special needs, and I think, how are you surviving without Jesus? Because for us, the only hope we have in the midst of all this is Jesus, because he's the one that makes it possible where our possibilities end. Where our capabilities fall short, his capability picks up. And so I wanted to read this scripture and kind of end with these thoughts for you. It's John 14, verse 27. This is Jesus, some of the best chapters of the whole Bible, I believe. Jesus speaking to his friends just really days before he ends up at the cross. Kind of this long dialogue of Jesus speaking. In verse 27, he says this: I am leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. Listen to that. Listen, the world understands peace, but there's a peace that Jesus wants to give you, that wants to give us, that the world cannot give. No matter how much you yearn and work towards it and pursue it, if it's not coming from Jesus, I'm telling you, that kind of peace will fall short.
Yeah.
And so Jesus says, so don't be troubled or afraid. Remember what I told you. I'm going away, but I will come back to you again. There's this idea that Jesus wants to leave with us a gift of peace in our world, a peace in our life. Now, sometimes I think we come in Christianity or as Christians and we think everything's going to be rainbows and butterflies and perfect and easy. Oh, I love Jesus, so now life is going to go well for me. And that was a lot of the disillusionment that I had to work through, especially as a pastor, even when this circumstance started to play out in our life. And then I read in John 16, verse 33, something that I think so many of us try to skirt over in Christianity, but there's this reality that life isn't going to be easy. And Jesus promises it. He actually says this in verse 33, chapter 16, I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. I'm telling you, if you need hope today, if you've come to your end, your last abilities of your own, it's a good place to end up, because that's where Jesus picks you up. That's where Jesus comes in, and that's where we can read scripture like this and say, take heart. Whoever you are listening today, watching this video on YouTube or listening to the podcast, take heart. Jesus has overcome the world. It doesn't mean your circumstances will, switch with the snap of a finger or even a simple prayer. It doesn't mean that. But it does mean that there is a way through this with Jesus in your life. And so I just admonish you again, find Jesus if you don't know him. It's a simple invitation into your life. He's waiting for you. And if you do need help, walk with someone. Go find a church that loves people. Go find people who are going to walk with you and care for you and bring you the peace that Jesus has given. So we thank you for listening today.
And our prayer for you, as always, is that may God give you the wisdom to be the best parent that you can be. May he give you the grace to love your kids when they fall and when they fail. And may he give you the faith to trust an unknown future to a known God. Thanks.